Bill O'Reilly here. Welcome to the No Spin News, Thursday, October 20th, 2022. Stand up for your country. So we're going to have a little history lesson. I'm going back in a time machine to when I was in the classroom in the early 1970s in Opelika, Florida, a slum of Miami. I'm sorry if you're an Opelika resident, but it's a slum. One of the most fascinating things I've ever done in my life was to teach history to kids who really didn't have any interest in history. But we made it come alive, and I'm going to try to do that now. But there is a serious undertone to this because I believe that Joe Biden is hurting every single American. Everyone, all 330 million of us being hurt by this current president. Now, he has no idea because he's delusional, as we, I think, have proven beyond any reasonable doubt. So a lot of us don't know how we're being hurt by him. And the good news is that in November, he's going to be neutered completely, and we'll get into that. But right now, it's bad here. Much worse than you think. And it's because families are losing a tremendous amount of economic power. And if you don't have any money in America, you're in trouble. So that is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. So Biden's been in office 21 months, and there has not been one thing that I can find, that I looked, that he's improved in our country. Nothing. Okay, so he took over, inflation was 1.3%, and is now approaching 9%. I mean, that's a disaster. And every one of us are subject to those higher prices, of course. Now, if my prediction is true and the Republicans win the House and the Senate, but even if they just win the House, then that will paralyze Joe Biden's next 2 years in office. He won't get any legislation passed at all unless there's a miracle conversion and he starts seeing the country in a problem-solving way, which of course he isn't. So it's over for Biden come November 8th. Now, it takes about a month and a half to transition from the old Congress to the new Congress, but by the end of January next year, you know, Biden is just going to sit there. He only sits there now, so, but, you know, nothing is going to get done, passed, or anything like that. So you say, well, he'll veto all Republican legislation. Yeah, he will. He will. But at least the country will see, hopefully, the Republican problem-solving abilities, if there are any. I mean, this Republican Party is not an actual, I mean, they're dubious. Word of the day, dubious. But maybe they have something. We'll see, right? And Biden can also issue executive orders, but the game now is the second he signs it, there's a federal lawsuit. And the federal courts are not friendly to Joe Biden anymore. They're not. They know what's happening here in America. So let's get to the history part. Right now, in my opinion, Joe Biden is the second worst president ever to serve in 21 months in office. The second worst. The first worst was our pal James Buchanan, the nation's first gay president. There's Jimmy. Pennsylvanian. He 15th president of the United States. Before that, he was Secretary of State. He was preceded by Franklin Pierce, another awful president. And then Lincoln came in after Buchanan was booted out of there in 4 years because he was so terrible. Why was he terrible? Okay. If you read Killing Lincoln, and I hope you do, that's the first Killing book, the nation was fracturing long before the Civil War broke out. It was fracturing way back into Andrew Jackson days in the 1820s, 30 years. It was fracturing because people in the North didn't believe in slavery, and it was a manufacturing economy. So New England, New York, Pennsylvania didn't believe in slavery and didn't need slavery because they were manufacturing things in plants. The South was an agrarian economy. They grew things. And the more money they made, okay, the more slaves they wanted because slaves were free labor. Free. And some of the slave owners were brutal. The slaves had no rights. They could be beaten. They could be murdered. Nobody's going to do anything about it. So the people in the North said this is an abomination, particularly if you were a Christian. All right? You can't do this. But the South was dominated by the big plantation owners. It wasn't so much the regular Southerners. They didn't have slaves. They couldn't afford them. I mean, slaves were expensive. If you go to Charleston today, you can see the slave market. I mean, you got to have a lot of money to get a slave. And the slavery upped the profits of tobacco, cotton, whatever was being grown in the South because you didn't have to pay labor. So anyway, the South dug in. The plantation owners who controlled the states dug in with the help of villains like John Calhoun, these kinds of people. And they said, hey, you want to do away with slavery? You do away with us. We don't want to be a part of America anymore. Now that movement, as I said, that was in play in the 1820s. And Jackson wouldn't, even though Jackson was a Southerner, Andrew Jackson, he didn't have any patience for that. So you get out of line, Jackson sent federal troops in and put you right back in line. But under Buchanan and Pierce before him, the Southerners started to raid Union depots and steal weapons and openly defy the government in Washington. And this went on for 10 years, but it reached a crescendo when Buchanan took office in 1857. And Buchanan just sat there because he wasn't really an abolitionist. He didn't care about slavery. He's from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, a free state. But, to him, I mean, he had other things on his mind. Put his picture up there. He was what they called back then a dandy, okay? Never married, had a relationship with a Alabama senator, and they lived together, these guys. His niece ran the White House. And this guy was just, it was nothing good about him. And I'm not talking about his private life. He just couldn't govern. He just couldn't. So when he got booted out and Abraham Lincoln came in, Lincoln, a hell of a mess. All right, and it was just months before Fort Sumter and the Civil War started. So nobody's ever going to top Buchanan as worst president ever. Second worst president was a guy who took over for Abraham Lincoln after Lincoln was assassinated, which is why killing Lincoln is so important if you want to understand this. So Andrew Johnson was former governor of Tennessee, uneducated guy, tailor. He was a tailor, okay? Very slick politician, tells everybody what they want to hear. But after the Civil War was over, the federal government had to rebuild the South, and this guy booted it. He allowed all these horrible people to go down to the South and exploit not only blacks, but whites too. They called them copperheads. The Southern people call them copperheads. The Northern came down. They just wiped them out fiscally and every other way, abused them. And Johnson just, So Johnson ultimately was impeached in the House, and in the Senate trial survived by one vote. That's it. One vote. But he was awful. The third worst president was Herbert Hoover. Now, Hoover was the 31st president. He gets into office in 1929, and the stock market collapses. Not his fault. He didn't have anything to do with that. Okay, so it was excess in the 1920s. It was speculation. People were running wild, borrowing money. And then when it all went south, they couldn't pay the money back, and the banks failed, and what happened. But the federal government back then, in 1929, no safety nets. If you were starving in the street, you died. It's like Mexico now. Mexico didn't have any safety net. Why do you think all Mexicans want to come here? Okay? So you're in trouble in Mexico, the government's not going to help you. That was the way it was in the USA back then. So people got thrown out of their homes. They couldn't afford food. There were bread lines. In Brooklyn, where my father lived, he used to tell me that outside his row house, where my grandparents lived, and he lived with his brother and sister, people were lined up at the local Catholic church to get fed. They didn't have any money to buy food. And you might have heard of the term Hoovervilles. These were people who were just homeless people. And they were living anywhere they could live, in shacks and shanties and all of that. Hoover sat there for 2 years and didn't do anything. He didn't mobilize anything. It just allowed the suffering to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And then Hoover would go, oh, I don't know. And then FDR, of course, was elected. And FDR brought in the New Deal, which was a system that some people don't like, of the government assistance. Almost everywhere, government creating jobs, government doing this, government doing that. Okay, so just recap: Buchanan worst, Biden second, Andrew Johnson third, Herbert Hoover fourth. You could flip Herbert Hoover and Andrew Johnson. Hoover was bad. It's like that. Hiring, of course, should be done on merit. Unfortunately, many large financial firms are using your money to force companies like Apple and Home Depot to adopt so-called racial equity audits. Strive Asset Management believes it makes companies like those less successful. But here's the good news. It is your money, not theirs. Strive just launched the Strive 500 on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol STRV. Strive uses their shareholder power to mandate America's largest public companies to focus on products and profits instead of politics and social justice. The bigger Strive gets, the more powerful their voice will be. Text BILL to 55022 to learn how you can buy the Strive 500, ticker STRV. That's BILL to 55022 to learn how you can buy Strive today.
Investors should consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses carefully before investing. For a prospectus or summary prospectus with this and other information about the fund, please call 855-427-7360 or visit our website at www.strivefunds.com. Read the prospectus or summary prospectus carefully before investing. Investments involve risk. Principal loss is possible. The Strive ETFs are distributed by Quasar Distributors, LLC.
Okay, so wrapping up the talking points memo. Why is Biden in this crew? Because Biden came in and created problems. Hoover didn't create the collapse of the stock market in 1929, the Great Depression. Biden created inflation by attacking the fossil fuel industry and then ordering trillions of dollars of money to be printed by the Treasury for his insane projects. Biden's infrastructure deal this, COVID deal that, we'll give this to you, this to that, massive spending, way out of control. So the combination of attacking the American oil industry and coal industry and fracking industry, attacking them, creating all kinds of regulations so they couldn't harvest the energy, right? And the printing of the money, which diminished the dollar is worth, okay, rocketed inflation. Biden did it alone. He did it. No Congress, they didn't vote for it. They voted for the stupid infrastructure bills, but it was way out of control till then. And that's the memo. Bill at BillO'Reilly.com. If you have comments, Bill at BillO'Reilly.com. Happy to hear them. And there were other very bad presidents. Carter was really bad, okay? And I said Pierce was bad, Millard Fillmore. I mean, I think, I can't prove it. I think Warren Harding's wife poisoned him. I think so. I mean, these guys were really bad, but nobody knew because there wasn't any reportage. Okay, let's get to this infrastructure law because Biden goes to Pennsylvania today and talks about it in Pittsburgh, and then he goes up to try to help Fetterman in Philadelphia. Wouldn't you love to be in a conversation with Biden and Fetterman? Talk about not knowing what's going on. What? Maybe Biden will get a tattoo when he's hanging out with Fetterman. I guess that's possible. Anyway, the infrastructure bill. So you remember $1.2 trillion bill. $1.2 trillion. So it's passed by Congress. It's Biden's thing. It's the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act passed November 15, 2021, less than a year ago. Okay, and it runs through 22 to 26, 4 years. Okay, 1.2 trillion. So I asked my staff, and they're good. I said, find out if there's anything in the infrastructure that's actually going on. Well, there is. We found 4 things. 4 things in a year. Okay. One, Boston Logan Airport Terminal E got $62 million to renovate. Terminal E. Okay. I guess it needed to be renovated. Then in Tampa Bay, 12.6 to construct a new berth at the port. All right, these are underway somewhat. Then in Phoenix, the Rio Salado River, they're going to build a pedestrian and bicycle bridge across it. I don't know why Arizona can't do that, but 25 million federal dollars. And finally, this is the best. You ever been to New Hampshire? Beautiful state. Love New Hampshire. And there's a town, Berlin, New Hampshire, and I've been there. It's a tiny town, but it's a nice town, right? So they get $20 million, Berlin, New Hampshire, to rehabilitate sidewalks and parking areas and install a snow melting system in the downtown area. Downtown area is like 2 blocks. Okay, so if you're in New Hampshire and you're near Berlin, that's it. That's all we could find. That's underway. After almost a year. Infrastructure bill. See, it's just, almost said a bad word, it's just garbage. It's all designed to say, oh, we're doing something. It's doing nothing. Nothing. Sergeant Schultz, remember Hogan's era? I see nothing. All right, Nancy Pelosi. Gotta love her, right? You gotta check in with Nancy at least once a week. Here's the latest Nancy Pelosi thing. She was speaking to I don't know, one of those podcasts, Punch Bowl. Quote, inflation's an issue, but it's global. It's global. What's the Republicans' plan? They ain't got nothing. Very good, Nancy. When you bring down unemployment, inflation goes up. So in any case, President Biden brought unemployment down, cut it in half. Inflation is here, but it's global. And it's not as bad as it is in some countries. Yeah, I guess Bangladesh, it's worse. I guess so. That's comforting, right? Okay, bringing unemployment down creates inflation, according to Nancy Pelosi. Total garbage. So Trump had to deal with COVID, where everybody was laid off because the government stopped commerce. Okay? So when Trump left office, 6.7% unemployment in this country. Not because there weren't enough jobs, it was because of all the COVID stuff. That people got paid money, all right, for not working. COVID relief, whatever. So Trump left 1.3% inflation, 6.7% unemployment. But there was active, come on, work for us. Companies needed workers in the recovering COVID environment. Okay, unemployment is now down to 3.5%. So under Biden in 2 years, it's dropped 2%, which is a natural attrition because COVID has receded. And this is Pelosi. We cut unemployment, so inflation had to go up. It's total garbage. All right? But who knows? I mean, the woman had no idea. Never has. Okay, that is the political landscape. I hope you enjoyed it. Let's go to a new poll. Siena College. It asks 792 registered voters. Among those who say democracy is under threat, do you think each of the following is a major threat? Mainstream media. 59% of Americans think the mainstream media is a threat to our democracy. And they're right. Donald Trump, 47%. Joe Biden, 39%. Federal government, 32%. Supreme Court, 27%. Electoral College, 25%. There are the major threats to our democracy. Okay. Now, why is the media a threat? Because we can't get the truth anymore. Why do you think that BillO'Reilly.com the no spin news that you're watching and listening to right now, is so successful. I mean, I don't have any corporation behind me. This is an independent news agency. It's because people know you come here, I'll tell you the truth. And I won't ignore big stories, and I won't spin them. And I'll tell you what I think and why I think it. And we'll give you as many facts as possible. Well, you don't get that anymore in the network news or the cable news. You don't get it. And I'll demonstrate this a little bit better later on. So why is that a threat to our democracy? Because if the voters don't know what's happening, they can't make responsible decisions. They don't know. You know, and how is everybody going to gather all this information? What I told you on the infrastructure 2 minutes ago, you didn't know that. I'll say there's not, you know, there are hundreds of thousands of people watching and listening to us. I'll say there's not one who knew what I told you. How could you? How could you know? All right? Now, it's our job to find it, and we're trained to do that. But you don't know. Oh, yeah, Joe Biden, 1.2 trillion infrastructure, everything is going to look so much better in this country. Garbage. The federal government sits on it because the bureaucracy is so grindingly horrible, it's hard to get anything done. Listen to this. Convicted home title thief explaining what happens after he forges your home's title and takes over as the new owner.
Nobody thinks that I can take their house and borrow against the house. Oh, no, I have title insurance. It's in my name, or he would have to get some special document. They would call me. You know, nobody's calling you. After I've stolen the title, borrowed against it, or sold the property, it's 60 to 90 days for that person to even figure out that they're the victim of this crime. You start getting foreclosure notices. You've got 4 mortgages on your house. You don't even own your home anymore. It's not even in your name.
Home title fraud is growing 2.5 times faster than credit card fraud, if you can believe it. You could be a victim and not even know it. Here's how to protect yourself and verify your home's title is still in your name. Please visit HometitleLock.com, promo code RADIO. Then register your address for your no-obligation home title report, a $100 value free. Again, get your free home title report at HometitleLock.com, promo code RADIO. Okay, final thought of the day is me and Kanye West. You may have noticed I didn't cover Kanye West because I don't really care. And I was on Newsmax last night with Eric Bolling, and here's how it went down. Go. I don't think Kanye West is a major news player in this country. I have no interest in him. If he did say bad about Jewish Americans or Jewish people in general, that's terrible. If he said bad things about Jewish people on my program, I would have edited them out as well. But I would have told the audience. See, I would have said, look, I probably wouldn't have run the interview. I would have said, look, we had an interview with Mr. West, and he said anti-Semitic things, so I'm not going to run it. But I just want you to know the reason I'm not going to run it is this. But again, I wouldn't have interviewed him anyway. I don't care whether he's conservative, libertarian, socialist, Bernie Sanders' best friend. The man does not have the credibility, in my opinion, to take up time on a news program when we have a country that's falling apart. Bolling, come on.
Yeah, but Bill, here's a billionaire, an idol, a music idol. He's African American, and all of a sudden he says woke culture is ruining the country and pushes back against Democrats. I think there are a lot of conservatives who say, well, let's get this guy on. You know, he's on our side. Someone who they thought was on their side, he's on our side. It's typical, media warfare.
Here's the mistake that everybody in cable news is making. Who cares if Kanye West is saying bad things about woke leftists? The people who care are conservative people, not the general public. It's not an important issue for your life. It's not analyzing why Joe Biden lives in a delusional state and every day harms every single working American. This is an entertainer, Bolling. This is a man who makes his living marketing himself. And that's why I didn't cover it, because it doesn't matter, and we have serious things to do here. And we don't cater to any ideology. because that's not our job. Our job is to watch them all and deliver to you the best information we can possibly get. And I hope you feel that way. Bill@BillO'Reilly.com. Thanks for watching and listening to the No Spin News. New column Sunday noon. See you on a Monday. Bill O'Reilly here. Vidgo, VIDGO, is a new streaming service that gives you live sports and programming you want at a price you can afford. With Vidgo, I get live sports networks, including ESPN and Fox Sports, along with incredible access to college football games, with 80% of every televised college football game in the first 3 weeks of September. 80%. Vidgo also has a great choice of news and entertainment program, including The First, Fox News, Newsmax, and more. On my new weekly program called Shock and Awe, exclusively on Vidgo, I'll break down the most important issues of the week, asking bold and fresh questions and sitting down for exclusive interviews with America's top news makers. For a limited time, when you sign up for Vidgo, you can also get a copy of my new book, Killing the Legends, free, and get $15 off Vidgo's premium service. So please go to Vidgo, VIDGO.com/BillBook. Sign up now.